Hello, everybody. Today I am here with Ed Latimore. Ed is a former professional heavyweight boxer, a competitive chess player, and a best selling author. Ed's writing focuses on self development, realizing your potential, and sobriety, all of which he approaches from personal experience, overcoming poverty and addiction. Check out his blog at edlatimore.com. So, Ed, you have got such an interesting story. And I want to first just let you kind of introduce yourself. Tell us your personal story, what path you took to get to where you are today, and what painful experiences did you have to overcome to become the person you are today?
Oh, all in an introduction. This so I grew up. I was born and raised in public housing, typical kind of stereotype, single mom, welfare, that kind of deal. And eventually, I left. I lived there for my entire childhood until I was 18, and then I eventually left and tried the college thing the first time around. Gave the old college try, as they say. I wasn't really ready at all, so ended up failing out, dropping out about a third semester. And I petered around and then got an interest in boxing. Started my amateur career at age 22, which is kind of old, but I had a lot of success. I had a great amateur career. Went on to have a pretty good professional career. During my professional fighting, I realized that fighting wouldn't be around forever. So I enlisted in the army and went back to school, all while being on my professional career, and eventually got a degree in physics. Sometime during that period, I dealt with alcoholism and got over that and had to deal with that. That was a thing, and now it's not a thing. It'll be 8 years, or will it be 9 years? Look at my touch it. Okay, so 8 years. It's been 8 years. This December, so I'm coming up on nine this year, right? Is that right? Yes, 2022 to be 9 years this December, and now I've been writing and making a living online, teaching, writing, growing social media, understanding that world. So that's kind of a nutshell of the story without any kind of points to jump off on.
So, I watched one of your videos about life in the projects, and it's completely different from how I think most people in this country grow up. And could you tell us some of the things that you went through and like kind of give us an idea of what that's actually like when you're a little kid? Because one thing I remember you said is you never ever truly felt safe.
Yeah, I think I think people kind of take, or a lot of people do, certainly not all, take for granted that one of the cool things about being a kid is that you don't have to encounter the roughness of the world. In fact, that when I try and come up with a way to define the concept of innocence as it relates to as it relates to a non-criminal idea, then what I end up coming up with every time I look at it is that we are describing the state where you're not responsible for your actions, and we can assign certain people in society that, like children, because they can't really, one, they can't really do any harm until a certain point, and two, they're learning, they're under the steed of the adults. We tend to look at the adults and go, that's your fault for not disciplining and controlling and moving around, right? That's the trade-off. And what ends up happening to kids that lose their innocence is that the they're exposed to the consequences of their decisions and the consequences of the world as it does to adults, without having the faculties and the capacity to deal with them. So I say all that to say that I had to figure out very quickly at a young age how to survive. And kids shouldn't have to figure out how to survive. That's like one of the definitions of being a child, is that you can't survive on your own.
Right.
but you have to figure it out. And so that is, I never felt safe because at school there was violence. You come home, violence. The regular neighborhood stuff, violence. So you just kind of get used to dealing with that. Becomes your normal, and you don't realize how rough that is until you get away from it. Like it's not like I had this. Like whenever I tell this story, I have to make it clear. It's not like I was I was a kid sitting around going, oh, this is so terrible. What woes me? I can't wait to get out. I mean, eventually I was like, I can't wait to get out. But the real issue was like, um, there was no real issue. I didn't know any better until I knew better. And then when I knew better, I was like, wow, I have some I'm really behind. I'm really got a lot of issues to work through. Not a lot of people to take care of me. I didn't see how a household, kind of functions normally, or even I wouldn't even say normally, just functionally until I got to high school and I got friends in a completely different part of town. That completely changed like everything I thought I knew, and I was awakened to just how disadvantaged and how set behind I was. And not every kid has that realization. I think one of the reasons why cycles continue, these generational curses idea, is that they don't not well, it's two reasons. One, they never step out and see something different. And two, they never do the work on healing from all of that stuff. So it gets repeated either by omission or commission.
So you mentioned in high school you started to hang out with some people who were living differently than you. Was that the first time you realized there was an out?
Oh well, okay. So you know what it's like. There's a great comparison. It's like you see something on TV and because it's on TV, or you don't know really. You're pretty sure it's real, and but you don't have any direct experience with it. You never touched anything like it. Never seen it. So to you, it's still just an imaginary thing. And then you see it and you go, "Wow, this is real." And when you see it's real, then you can come up with a way to attain it. That's probably the best way I've ever described my relationship with I call it my pre-14 life and post-14 life.
Hmm.
Is that pre-14, I had glimpses and I knew these things existed, but they weren't real to me, you know. But then when I got around them and my friends started to be from this neighborhood in this area, it was a very different experience for me. And I got to see something real and touch something real and know, okay, this is attainable. These are like regular. I mean, to me, they're different, but they're regular people. It's not just reserved for the sitcoms on television.
And you said in this particular video that I was watching that most people don't make it out.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Because here's the thing. All right, you're dealing with, and this is hard for people to imagine. If everyone I'll start with a great little anecdote. I love these things, right? It's like that old like joke, that old story. There are two fish swimming along, two younger fish, and they swim by an older fish, and the older fish goes, "Hey!" They go, well, first they say hello, and the older fish goes, "Hey, water is great today," and they just nod and swim off, and then the younger fish a few seconds later go, "What the heck is water?" And that's if you grab that idea, the idea being that when you're surrounded by something,
Hmm.
you don't even know you're surrounded by it. Like you don't realize how that is. So what are you ever even trying to escape from?
Yeah.
Okay. This is such a weird idea to wrestle with because now our world is so interconnected and so linked up that it's very I would like to think if I was born in 2020 that or not 2020 in 2000 that as I was coming of age 2010 2011 I'd have the internet to be able to reach out and see and communicate with the world. I'd like to think that, right? But I know that
Mhm.
at that time these tools didn't exist, so all I knew was everything I knew. All right, and then so what does that have to do with people not being able to make it out? They don't know what they're making out of. They're like, what's water? This is just how people are. And not only is it just how people are, there's kind of a pejorative attitude that comes towards being something different. So there's this subtle, in many cases, overt, I guess, pressure trying to keep you where you are and reinforce the environment that you're in. A great example of this is whenever you would speak proper coming up in these neighborhoods and use the correct grammar, they would say that's talking white, and that's silly. Like, that's an idea you just kind of internalize over your life, and then before you know it, you're telling somebody when they speak proper they're talking white, and you're like, that's the silliest thing ever. you know it's a weird thing, and like I see it now, like with health. A lot of I was talking to a friend, and I was like, losing weight would be healthier for you, and I was like, I can't imagine being that weight. It's not going to like look good or feel good or be healthy. And I'm like, well, yeah, it would take your BMI below 30, which is crazy, right? The people who have it, they just come up and see these things, and it reinforces that whole health idea. By the way, is related to why the Black community is overrepresented in cardiovascular disease and diabetes, because we have this idea collectively as a community that this is a healthy weight, when it's, and anything else is like for white people. It's actually what someone said. So you start seeing those things, but reality is reality, and that's not the truth. So that's why it's very hard to escape, because if all you do is surround yourself with this environment, with this neighborhood, you don't have a particular ambition. I think ambition, like intelligence, is normally distributed. I don't think most people, and I don't have to think. I mean, they don't get out because they're not trying to, or they don't have the ability to, or they can't even, they can't even see that there's out, just moving along on a strata.
So it sounds like you kind of got out when you joined the military. Is that was
well,
that your
not quite.
no?
Because the life story, this part is always crazy when people hear this, because it seems linear, and I guess it technically is, because what else could it be? But I didn't join the military until I was 28.
Oh, okay.
I left my neighborhood. Mentally, I left my neighborhood at 14.
Uh-huh.
When I went to a high school across town, and I got to see a very different type of living, very different life, have very different social interactions daily. Physically, I left when I was 18, when I could leave. And I was able to, and I still like, for example, was grown up, or more like grown up after 14. I don't think I spent a single holiday at home. Not completely. I either woke up or fell asleep or spent the whole day at someone else's house during Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all those type of deals. I didn't want to be home because I seen something different, and I knew that my environment was not going to help me. I became aware of like what it was.
So what personality qualities do you think that you possess that allowed you to make it out versus somebody who didn't?
Yeah, so this is a one of those things that I think a lot about, in terms of like how much luck has influenced my life. And I have a great respect for luck. There are things I couldn't control, like I couldn't control my personality. I think people, you can modify it, but kind of your base traits, whatever, right? And intelligence, you definitely can't control. All this comes to say what helped me out. Well, being intelligent enough to be able to keep up with the classwork where at the school I went to, having we'll call it the strategic mind, the ability to look into the future. That's, I think I'm really great at that now, not just then. But like, for example, my mom didn't tell me to go to this school when I was 13. I went and applied myself.
How
And
did you get the idea to apply to that school?
I knew it was in a different place than where I was at.
You
And
just
it was
wanted to be in a
far.
different place?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and I had like heard stuff about the school around coming up, but like I said, okay, this is where I want to go. Let me try and go here. Stuff like that. One of the things that probably benefited me, I think I look fine now, but I've always looked this way. And if I'm like a young kid, I mean, I don't know, man. Like I wasn't very popular. I got made fun of. A lot of kids called me ugly, and I was a nerd, right? So what does this do? This keeps me from getting sucked into the social group. No one wants to really hang out with me. I ended up with a fairly My mom made a lot of mistakes. One of the mistakes she did not make, I don't think I ever made, whether it was out of fear or love, and it was a combination of me just not being a reactive guy. I didn't really get into trouble at all. I was a very, part of it was because school was so easy and I was great at entertaining myself. And it was easy because these are terrible schools, right?
Hmm.
School wasn't easy in high school. High school was hard, but I was in a different school.
Yeah.
Uh, but those things come together, and they're not things I can control. At 13, 12, I don't have the agency to think about this. I just, I have it's a very basic idea of setting a goal, but I was lucky enough to have the traits and, yeah, the traits to do it. I mean, the ability to figure out how people talk and behave and then modify, because not everyone is like that. Some people are very, this is how I am. And I am like that, but you have to understand social currency, body language, and how to communicate, tone of voice, the lexicon you develop as you communicate with a new group of people. All of these things come into play, and I think many of them are functions of intelligence, and that's the thing I couldn't control. I was part of a study from that they tracked kids from birth to like 22. I think
Hmm.
that was the last test, age 22. I don't know if to like recall this or anything. And so I had an IQ test every 2 years for the first half of, or for the first 10 years, and then every like three, I think. And I've an IQ of 130. That's not a thing to just that gives you some advantages.
Yeah, that gives you a
It,
lot of advantages.
it certainly allows you to, and especially depending on how it's distributed. I wasn't the strongest math student, but I am a fantastic communicator, and communication is, I think food communication is more important than technical skills. So all of that comes together, and it helps me navigate the pitfalls of my life, the unfortunate circumstances, because luck works the other way. I wasn't born to even a middle class family.
Yeah.
All right, so the universe is funny that way. I actually never made that connection. That, on one hand, I'm lucky that I could get out, but but I, I was unlucky that I had to get out.
Yeah, you're very lucky that you are a lot smarter than the majority of the population.
And you know what's
That's
funny
amazing.
about that though? Like it's not just the intelligence that helps, because I have a friend. In fact, it's so weird, man. He was my best friend growing up, and we recently reconnected. Born a week before me,
Hmm.
and he was also highly intelligent, but he was skewed just a little differently, and he took his intelligence, and but by pure luck, he's not in jail now. But he ended up becoming one of the more powerful drug lords in the city by that type of intelligence, that type of acumen,
Oh,
skill,
interesting.
strategy. It all depends. And intelligence is probably the least important trait after a certain point, right? Like like if your IQ is like 85, you're gonna have some trouble. But after like 110 or even 100, we all right? Then what your environment is, what you come into. But as
Hmm.
he had a very different home life. I mean, mine was hard, his was even harder, right? So all these things come together, and I'm lucky. I'm lucky. We're all lucky. Lucky for different reasons, lucky in different ways. The ability to seize opportunities when they show up. I could have just as easily turned into a kid who just came home and played video games, and that was my escape. Instead of trying to
Hmm.
constructively build myself and play sports and stuff like that. Like I did everything, but I didn't want to go home. I mean, I did the musical, I did after school course. I played three sports, had a job. I did everything I could to stay away from being at home. And so maybe that was lucky for me
Yeah,
in a weird way.
that's really interesting. I so you have this book, um, has a very interesting title, Sober Letters to My Drunken Self. And so you had a problem with alcohol for a while, and
Big problem.
you're sober now, and you wrote this book. I want to read um, a review on Amazon of this book. Since reading this book, I've been 6 months sober and I haven't looked back. I've tried AA and all the mainstream advice, but it was Ed's book that finally did it for me and helped me get my head on straight. Sober Letters to My Drunken Self is anecdotal and written from the heart. Ed recounts his experiences as an alcoholic and puts into words what most alcoholics know but can't quite convey. He touches upon the fears and feelings of guilt he had and offers viable solutions as well as words of wisdom to live by. That is one hell of a review.
That
And
is a great review. You know,
I
I
haven't even
usually
finished it. There's 2 more paragraphs.
Oh wow.
Um, but so can you talk about your process of sobriety and how you're helping other people? Like how did you manifest sobriety? Because that's what this master class is really about. How do we manifest what we want in life? You manifested yourself getting out of the projects and you manifested sobriety in your life. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. You know, and I never thought of it in that lens, right? But yeah, I guess I did manifest leaving the projects for sure. I wasn't conscious of it. I would just the language I would have used is probably I just I set my sights on it and did everything I
Mm-hmm.
could to make it happen. But in terms of sobriety, um, so I hit a low bottom, but it wasn't a rock bottom. Okay, this there's a big difference. I I didn't like the person I was. I didn't like the issues that I was going through. I didn't like dealing with the guilt. Uh, and I said, and on top of that, so this was around that period I enlisted in the military, went back to school. I had stuff to lose now. I had just met the fiance, a wife, whatever we want to call her now, until we're married officially. But I had just met her. This was 10 years ago. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like if I ruin this relationship, because I was the first person I met. Luck, effing luck, by the way. Here it is again, where I was like, okay, I really think that I have a shot. And I was right. And I was in school and I was in the military and I just turned pro. Those like the 4 things when I list and I go, okay, I care about something in this world now. Like because there was a lot of, and I didn't realize this until after, there's a lot of self-destructive behavior, very like not really caring, um, and not in a good way, and really living for approval rather than trying to build respect. And I won't even call it approval. Attention is a
Mm-hmm.
better way to put it. Instead of trying to make myself a respectable human and all this, right? So I'm living that way, and then I decide I remember real clear. I was sitting on this bar stool, drinking with some friends. It was cold and at night, and I just remember thinking, I was like, man, one day you're going to be 33, 5 years in the future, and so then you're going to have more options or fewer options, and if you're going to have more options, what are you going to do to make that happen? And so I started looking at all the things that kept me from making progress to that point and got rid of them and got control. And everything kept coming back to alcohol.
So did you make a list?
Sort of a list, but it all kept coming back to alcohol. I used to
Uh-huh.
proudly say, that 95% of my personal problems are either caused by or exacerbated under the influence of alcohol. And that's ridiculous because because the way here's alcoholic thinking for you. I'm like, okay, well, as long as I'm not drinking, I don't have problems in my life. That's how I heard it, right? When the reality is that, yo, you'd have no problems if you stop drinking. Like that's how what as I listen to that now, being completely sober and like together, and all of your problems are coming from drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that's how I looked at it. When I did try to make a list, everything kept reverting back because I kept asking why, how, why, how, why, how, and the commonality was alcohol, 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 in one way or the other. Either I was drinking and it was removing my or reducing my capacity in some form, or causing me to just flat out miss opportunities or mess them up, or I was using it as an excuse to be foolish, in the sense that, like, I would rearrange my days to make sure I could go drink instead of training. And I would waste entire afternoons or evenings sitting on the stool drinking, and being a fool, man. It really, like, I look back on that person and being like the age. It's not even an age thing, because I know a lot of people doing the same stuff. But time has passed, and that's kind of how we compare. We go, this amount of time has elapsed between these two events, and I couldn't imagine. I'm really happy that I fixed that guy, because I like this life a lot. Like, I think it's a good life, you know. Like today, I'm getting on a plane and I'm flying down to my buddy's bachelor party in New Orleans, and I can do that. I know I wouldn't be able to do that if I was still battling booze, because I likely wouldn't have done everything to get my finances correct and build up my life. Maybe I would have done something to ruin our friendship or whatever. But this is good. I mean, I just look around and I know that everything around me doesn't feel permanent. It feels like I earned it and I have to continue earning it. Like nothing feels set. And I think one of the tickets I had to cash in was my vice with alcohol. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone has to. But for me, my story, I had to stop drinking.
One thing that I think doesn't come up a lot of times in discussions about alcoholism is, and I don't understand why, it's the financial cost. I mean,
Yeah.
because that's expensive, like, and the reason I say that is because when I was in my 20s, my social group was comprised mostly of people who they wanted to go drink after work. And I was never a big drinker. I never really liked alcohol, never had a problem with it. And I was in school at the time, and I just couldn't afford it.
Yeah. It's
Like, why would I go out to a bar and spend $10 on beer if I could barely even buy myself a burrito,
well,
So
yeah, and
for
that
me, it was an economics thing. That's why I never got into it. But I
you know,
think, yeah,
it's messed up priorities.
yeah,
Like, I had them the worst. I was like broke. I had drinking money though.
yeah. How did you manage that if you were broke? I'm curious
Well, okay, so when I say broke, I mean I had
because I
just
couldn't manage it.
broke even,
Yeah.
in life, and that was by reducing all of my costs. Living with like three dudes,
Mhm.
and not having a car, and working, a crap job. And I had, I guess there was always a sense of ambition, but the alcohol took such a priority for me, and it just ate up so much of my life. I think about this so often, and it never stops making me, like, w- kind of hate myself, and, well, at least hate the old me. It's not the new me. I'm a different guy now. But at
Yeah,
one point, you think about this, and you're just like, man, how could your priorities be so mismatched? But that's what happens when you are dealing with, and maybe not necessarily addiction. Like I'm not like fiending for booze. Well, not really. I don't want to. Well, you never know. I'm thinking about it, but I know my real issue was my general relationship. Maybe it wasn't in the sense of an addiction the way people think of it, but I could not just have one or even just two. And if there was alcohol in the vicinity, I had to drink it. And all of my social activities and who I spent time with and who I saw was dictated by the availability of alcohol. So to me, that's a problem, especially because if I get there and then I'm going to drink my ass off and then I'm done, and then I'm going to make a fool of myself, take an unnecessary risk, ruin my life. I'm just so lucky that I didn't do anything irreversible, like irreversible or irreparable, because very likely, I mean, there were times that it could have gone that way.
I want to go back to something you said because it really stuck with me because I struggled with this myself. You said something about but you had hatred for your younger self who was an alcoholic. And I'm thinking out loud, so bear with me here.
Okay.
I've had kind of similar feelings about, when I think back to the stupid things that I did in my 20s, and I'm just thinking, God, what was I thinking back then? And then I try to take like because I don't, I think about my younger self and how she would feel if her older self was thinking that way about her, you know?
Yeah.
And then I just want to hug my younger self and show up as a leader and show up with compassion and in kind of a mothering sort of way, because that younger person was acting out in those ways because she didn't feel safe and she didn't feel loved. So what do you think about that?
I think, yeah. So the reasoning behind the behavior to that extreme, certainly in my case, and I know a lot. I'm masking. I know what I was masking. I didn't feel. Even to this day, I still have this fear of people don't really like me. Like no one would show up to for anything. I don't even tell people when stuff happens because I'm like don't I don't want to burden you, that kind of deal. And so alcohol gave me a way to feel very accepted, even in a subtle, even in a slight
Mm,
social activity. It gave me a way to kind of feel like I had a real identity, and I didn't feel that way, which is crazy. Like if you look at me on paper, uh, but I didn't feel that way. Now, as far as the feeling of me now looking at me then, yeah, sure. I wish in some alternative universe with crazy technology, I could go and serve as a guidance,
hmm
to the me, right? But with that said, do I listen? Maybe I don't. Maybe I do. But I do think there is something to the idea of path dependence for the outcome that I don't think I get here if I don't go through that. I don't think I write a book that helps a bunch of other people with their sobriety and with their alcoholism if I don't go through that experience. So, when people say I don't have any regrets, I think that's too simple. I think it is what I always like to say is that, you know, because the typical justification for having the regrets is that they were comfortable with the outcome. They're like, everything turned
hmm
out great, so I have no regrets. Yeah, that's fine, but it's okay to go, I wish I could have got here through a different path, a different process. Now, if I could somehow get here through a different process, great. But I know that or at least right now, I don't think I could have. So I don't think my perspective on the old me changes because the old me was at the end of the day, it was kind of a fool. Period. We just have to look at that and accept that we've grown. Because I don't, and this is kind of my approach to things in the present, not even looking back in the past. I do not believe the answer to everything or even most things is is a is a is to lead with compassion. I think compassion needs to be the shaft, but the tip of the spear needs to be like corrective medicine, some of it very tough and bitter before problems arise. Because positive reinforcement is to keep good behavior going, negative reinforcement is to stop bad behavior. And if you look at that and then extrapolate the emotions that accompany that, I think I would have benefited. And this is the idea of like getting people off the street in prison or punishment. I think I would have benefited from someone going, "Yo, you're out of hand." Now, fortunately, I did it to myself
hmm
before society had to interrupt. But even now, I wasn't worried, because the real issue is other people's lives too, and mine. and I tried to care. I cared a little bit more about mine, and it got me there. But imagine if I had been starting with enough sense and compassion to worry about others around me, and I don't think it works. But I do like the idea of, well, you can understand something but not condone it, is how I'll go. So I understand how I was like that, but I don't. I still don't. I would not look back and be like, "Look, man, you need a hug, brother. Like, you need a you need a slap. You need a slap, and some sense is probably closer to what I would say. But
Okay.
even still, but it would be a correct. But it would be a slap with love. Be like, look, man, here's what's wrong. We got to do this. Otherwise, you may have to go to jail, buddy. You know, kind of deal.
Yeah. So a lot of people, maybe they don't know what they want or how they're going to get it, and they drift from one idea to another, never finishing anything. How did you personally get clear on what you wanted and how you were going to attain it?
Ah, that's a great question. So I I always kind of had clarity. What ended up happening, right? Why I would drift a little bit is because I think I was looking for a route that I could make things happen with. Ultimately, if you don't have so there's two main resources, time and money. If you don't have money, you got to give up time. And if you don't have time, you got to spend money, kind of deal. And like going to school when I was finally like ready and I had a plan for school, I didn't have any money. So I had to give up some time. That meant joining the army. That meant basically like yeah, I wouldn't have been able to survive for the first 3 years of my undergraduate degree if I wasn't fighting. Well, the money I was getting from fighting, I used towards my degree. Um, yeah, those are really two big investments of time. If I had money, maybe I bounce around. But I'm saying all that to say, to make sure it's on topic. I'm saying all that to say, I always had some idea of what I would like to do. I just needed to figure out what was the best way to get there with my capabilities. Like fighting always in my mind was a means to an end. I didn't know when the end would come, but I knew that it would not last forever. Now, in a perfect world, I would have fought for a little more money before the end came, but it got me far enough. It was a step off. It was a great stepping stone because I tell this great story. When I was 28, before I enlisted, before I had a single credit of college, the best job I could get, I was working at T-Mobile selling phones for 9.28 an hour plus commission. Okay. And then I enlisted and I'm fighting and all this great stuff, right? And then I lose my fight and I lose my sponsor and I'm out the army at this point. So I got to figure out how I'm gonna pay my bills and what I can do for a living. Turns out high schoolers suck at math and physics. And it opened up a great opportunity. And I had to charge $50 an hour because people with my skill set, they tend to have jobs. But I was still in school and needed to make money and everything. And I could get to the school district, which was suburban. Anybody out there listening, if you ever want to, get involved in tutoring, the suburban schools with a big tax bracket, they can afford you. At least they can pay you enough to make it worthwhile. And so that really opened up opportunities. I could now like do this, like tutor, and then work on other stuff and keep making jumps. But I tell that story to show how boxing served as just this means to an end.
Hmm.
It was an investment of my time, a big investment, to get further along in life.
So, what would you tell people who have been trying to manifest something in their life over and over, but it's just not working? Like, are they doing something wrong?
I don't think they're doing anything wrong. I think so. When I think of manifestation, I'm a big believer in, and I don't even like to use the word believe, man. It's the physicist in me, but I'm a big believer in the idea of unintended positive or I don't want to say consequences because that has a negative repercussion outcomes. Externalities. There we go. A big believer in unintended positive externalities. What I mean by that is if you intend to do something and you just keep trying to do that and you pull all your effort and resources and time, not only is it very likely that you'll achieve it, but you're also in the process setting in play things that you can't see or even predict, but will have a positive impact on you and will make a big difference in your life. You don't know how, but it
Yeah.
will. And what you have to do, your job, you can't change the what we'll call it the batting average of the universe. You can't change that. But since you can't change it, that means you got to get up to bat more often, right? Because 10% of 400 swings is a lot bigger than 10% of 40 swings. So you got to get a lot more swings and a lot more chances. And that is analogous to the idea of taking more action. That like if you do in the physical realm, you set these things in motion, and it becomes much more likely that you'll manifest whatever you want. Like take something kind of nebulous or at least more qualitative, dating, right? If
That's
you're trying to
exactly
like
what I was thinking of when you were talking.
if you're trying to manifest like the ideal partner, you could think about it and write these lists or whatever, or you could go, well, here's what this person wants. Let me do a few things. One, let me make myself the maximum. Let me max out on my genetics, period. Right. Let's take care of the physical, because that requires looking at reality, because a lot of people want to go, oh, looks don't matter. No, that's just, you ever see Liar Liar, the old movie? Goes when his son
I've
goes,
never
why
seen
don't
it.
there's a funny line. It's about the idea that Jim Carrey plays this lawyer that can't tell a lie for like a certain
Okay.
amount of time, and his son asks him something about like, why do people say beauty is on the inside? Well, when people, my teacher says beauty is on the inside, and he goes, oh, that's just something ugly people say, and it's funny, but there's a grain of truth in this example we're talking about, because when we're dealing with the dating realm, there's a reality portion you face, which is that your looks do matter. So you go max those out. Okay, so you've taken care of your looks. Now it goes, okay, this ideal person, what do they like to do? Let me, at the very least, involve myself tangentially. Whether if they like politics, let me get involved in some grassroots campaign. If they are travelers, maybe I'll learn a language or something like that, or start traveling myself. If they like to write, I start a blog and get my writing out there. You just start putting these things in motion. They're actions. I think that is what manifestation. Uh, if I could say manifestors, you're missing this one thing. You're missing the action component, because the universe responds to your actions. As long as they're constructive, then you're going to do a lot of good. And your intent doesn't matter. Like that's the other thing too. Your intent and what you think, these are they don't have a dimensionality to them. They're not, they can't affect the physical world, but the actions you take do. So you want to make sure that you're trying to make the world better, make yourself better. It's one of my tenets of life, is that if you can't make something better, at least don't mess anything up.
Yeah.
And so if you take that approach in general, you're going to be okay. But specific to what you want, no one manifests $1,000, $1,000,000, or a healthy body or a great relationship with people, not romantic, even friendships. It's the result of action, 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 action. What the manifestation process, the law of attraction, all those things do, in my opinion, is what they do is they keep your mind focused. So all the actions you take support it, and you are able to spot opportunities and see things in a way that support your goal, but your action has to seize them.
Yeah, I like what you said about the example in terms of dating, about getting yourself, you can't change your genetics, but you can do the best that you can with
Right.
which you
You
have.
you
And
you
it made me think of something that a little exercise that I did after I got divorced. I made a list of the qualities that I wanted my future husband to have. And then I made a list of what kind of woman did I have to be to attract that kind of guy. And
Brilliant.
there were some things that, some switches that went off in my head, some things that I needed to start doing and some things that I needed to stop doing. Because I think when we're in the realm of dating, we're so focused on like, can the other person meet my needs? Does this person have all the qualities that I want? But we rarely think, well, what kind of person do I have to be to get that kind of person,
Yeah, it's
to attract
it's
that kind of person, I should say.
yeah, no, but that's everything is analogous to everything else, right? So not just the dating realm, but that's a very easy place to start and use it.
Yeah. It's a great
But
example that everybody can relate to.
but like for income, if you want to make $100,000 a year, right? You ask yourself, well, what do I have to do to make $100,000 a year? What do I have to be? What skill set? What work ethic? Where
Mm-hmm.
am I comfortable? Right? And if you're not
What kind
willing
of
to,
qualities do I have to have?
and if you're not willing to do it, that's fine. Just know that you won't. It's highly unlikely that you'll get it.
So you mentioned earlier your beliefs, your kind of belief systems, and that you were coming from a physics background. So my next question may or may not apply. What role does God or religion or spirituality play in how you serve others and how you work through your challenges to get the end result that you want?
You know what's funny about that, man? People who study physics, we
My dad's a physicist, by the way.
so
So I know.
it. I have a okay. So first to start, I'm very much a believer in God. I don't like the word God for some weird reason, but I'm very much a believer in that there is something that precedes us that is greater than us, created the universe and put things in motion. I'm also a realist. I cannot buy into the idea that this this being, whatever it is, cares about the ongoings. I'm not saying he hates us. I'm just saying I don't think it matters, right, to him what goes on. Things are put in motion, go on. As far as how that affects me, it doesn't affect me at all because of that particular belief. What guides me is a sense of connection with other humans. And I really think this is what spirituality, or whatever any religious system you follow to interpret the spiritual realm, that seems like one of their underlying tenets. Despite all the surface differences, there are certain things that show up, and in all of them, and in every system that shows up, whether it be the idea of a mitzvah in Judaism. I can't remember. I can't remember the word is lost on me in for Islam. Or
Baraka,
yes,
blessing.
and but no matter what it is, we are. It's to train us to work better together, to recognize the sacred in the other person, and to treat that person as such. Because when you do that, the closer you can get to doing that, the better the outcome tends to be for everyone involved and people not involved. Okay, it's no coincidence. You look at the Ten Commandments. Um, it's no coincidence that a lot of that stuff, it's not just bad for you. It's not just bad for the other person, but like you covered your neighbor, man. Pretty soon you guys are going to be like trying to fight and steal from one another, and don't look at his wife either because that's a step before you trying to take her, and now you got the Montagues and the Capulets, or Romeo and Juliet, or something crazy, right? All this stuff pops up when we violate, or to keep us from violating one another. So, like I always, say, what are my tenets? One, forgiveness, but forgiveness isn't justice. In other words, I'm able to look at what why a person did it, and it is my moral duty, not just moral, but I even go as far as to say intellectual responsibility to understand why that person did it, and to really understand, like put myself in their shoes and see, oh, okay, I guess I would have done that too, no matter how heinous the act. Because if you can't do that, you can't prevent it from happening again. You can't adjust and learn from it. So, and I think forgiveness is kind of this bridge. So do that. Don't mess up anything, or rather, don't make the world worse because how you treat people. You know, if they cross your path, they should leave a little better. If you go into an area, it should be a little better because you got there. And if that's hard, just don't mess anything up. Don't make it worse. The idea is to continue, right? And don't hurt innocent people. I'm a really big, one of my pet peeves, real pet peeve is abuse of power, which is,
Yeah, mine too.
whenever you have the ability to, whenever you have more, we'll call it ability to affect the universe at a micro or macro level. That's what we'll call power, and you use it against people for selfish gain. Yeah. I'm not saying you have to be a philanthropist, but to use it to take from others is really heinous to me. And I think if you do all those things, you're gonna do okay. Big believer in the idea of treat people not as they would like to be treated, because there's some sick people out here, but treat them, and and not even as how you want to be treated, but treat them, hold them to a divine standard, and try and even if it's not that high, a baseline of respect that you meet every person with and treat them with. That's even better than nothing. So to answer your question, yeah, God does not actually, at least not directly. I'm sure these are like derivatives of Judeo-Christian ideas, but that's okay if they are. I don't care, because they still, in my experience, my day to day, if I do that, if I live this way, then I make everyone's world better, and I make my world better. So there's a very selfish component of it too. When people like me and people, you know, believe that I'm in their corner, they're going to be a little more likely to be in my corner. They're going to be a little more likely to support me. See how this works? If you're a little selfish, but it's the right path of selflessness, right?
It's
It's
selfishness and service at the same
yes,
time. Yeah.
then you can do a lot of good. But if it's selfishness without service, ooh, that's a problem.
I'm reminded of how we got here in the first place, where you and I are. It's because I liked your tweets. I had followed you on Twitter for a long time, and I'm
Oh,
not
thank
even
you.
I'm not even active on Twitter anymore. But when I was trying to think of people for this series, I was thinking of the people that I used to follow and read on Twitter, and you popped up in my mind. And now, because of your tweets, we're having this conversation. And inshallah, which is Arabic for God willing, because I'm a Muslim, um, inshallah, this interview will help other people in ways that you and I can't even imagine. So, one last question. What would you say to somebody who's stuck in a victimhood mentality because of past trauma or because of a belief that they have that's holding them back? Um,
Well,
yeah,
I would just ask them to, or tell them to ask themselves, is this making my life better? You ever see American History X? There's a great scene
no,
in American History X. Are you familiar with the concept of the movie?
no,
So it's about the reformation of a guy who was a white supremacist, did a crime, then went to he killed this black kid who tried to break into his house. They ruled it was not self defense in the way he killed them. He ended up doing like 2 years in real prison, and ends up like being converted because he makes friends with this black dude in jail. But before everything goes down, there's this really violent scene where he determines that the white brotherhood in prison, they're not like really about it. Like they're like buying drugs from the Mexicans, and he doesn't approve. And so so they rape him and then leave him for dead in the in the shower. While he's in the hospital in the prison, his black teacher visits him from high school, and they're having a conversation, and he says to him, It goes, well, ask yourself, has anything you've done so far made your life better? And that scene always stuck with me because, and this is why I'm very much against victim mentality, even if you are a victim, because when you take that on, and what is being a victim? So if a person who's victimized, something happens to them that is negative that they could not stop, they were powerless to. That is an event,
Mm-hmm.
and that can happen to anyone. But when you make that an identity, you lose the ability to affect the world and make it someplace better for you. You were like, why
That's
would you
brilliant.
want that? So I'd ask that person, what have you done, or how has this made your life better? The way, this mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can't tell me in a way it has, I say, well, do you want? Then it goes, well, do you want better? Because that's an important part. If you want better. Now, if you want better, or rather, if you don't want better, that's the end of the conversation. You're going to be very content and happy. You have acquired what you desire. Even if we don't agree, you've acquired it. That's cool. But if you do want better for your life, now I've got you thinking. You have walked logically and emotionally sidestep from victimhood is solid to this is not really working for me, and it hasn't worked for me. So let's see what I can do next. And we can take that approach for anything, any behavior we're trying to get someone to change, any perspective or mindset that we think is detrimental and we know needs to be modified. We can go, okay, ask yourself, has your method made things better or worse?
That's great. So, can you tell me about some project that you're working on that people can get involved in?
So I'm working on two projects right now, for sure, and then I'm sure more will pop up. That's just the nature of this life. The one I'm putting on a live writing seminar for writing threads and, well, writing on social media, and a lot of that tends to follow this threaded format because of the way social media works. But in that seminar, I'll be teaching the basics of kind of how to write engagingly without being authentic, how the algorithm works, both in the words you put in and the things you hashtag, and how to communicate and foster connections with people. Because whenever someone talks about the media, or whenever someone talks about social media, there's a heavy emphasis on the media, and people forget about the social. These are networks. Okay, so I'll be doing all that and giving that seminar, and I'm really excited about that. I'm running a cohort helping guys get off of pornography, dealing with guys who have, because pornography addiction is surprisingly a big deal. Because I mean, this stuff is just like it's really incredible. It's like laser guided missiles to the brain that you can access anywhere with the internet, and it ruins lives. And then guys, I just think if we can get that under control, we can strengthen a lot of our relationships, not just the ones that exist, like because it hurts families, but I think it will make guys more attractive in general. And just always writing something, putting stuff on my website, newsletters, posts. I really try to live by the idea of putting stuff out there that's going to make the world a little better, whether it be through laughter, thought, or my observation.
That's awesome. And so we're going to have links below this video where you can find Ed online. So, Ed, do you have a free gift for people?
I do have a free gift,
Can you tell us
and
about it?
yes, it'll be a method for how I stop drinking. My 3 steps to stopping, getting sober. And if you're able to take that and you can port it to any other habit that you want to break that is negative, that
Oh, that's awesome.
any major life change, because the 3-step process I used for evaluating my drinking and going, wow, okay, this is something that we have to kick and do, and then it'll work. And I've used it to deal with a number of things, and the review in the book speaks to it. Uh,
Yeah. So this is
So,
kind of taken out of your book.
yep, taken out of
Okay.
my book. It is actually a section from the book.
Okay, great. So you can get Ed's free gift. There's a link below. You can, this is a download, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely.
So link below. That is really awesome. Thank you so much, Ed. That's very generous of you. And thank you very much for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me.